Well, glad that you're still here with us on Morning Express. It's now 26 minutes to 9. And, joining me in the studio is none other than Peter Limberg, Director General for Deutsche Welle.
Yes,
thank
good
you
morning.
For joining. Good morning, and thank you for being here with us. Now, for the benefit of those who may not know what Deutsche Welle is, maybe you could start by telling us a little bit about Deutsche Welle.
Well, Deutsche Welle is the international broadcaster of Germany, and we are a worldwide active, and we are an international broadcaster which focus very strong on Africa and Asia, but now we are in Africa, so we're focusing very hard on Africa. And we renovated our channel, and it's now more something which you can also see as an offer to Africa, so that we can have interesting stories for African viewers, and maybe no longer be just the Europeans showing their life to Africa, but also getting into cooperation. And this is the basic philosophy behind it. But you could compare Deutsche Welle obviously with our competitors like BBC or France 24. But I think we are on a good track now, and we are known in the markets in Africa. We are more than 60 years old, so,
wow. So is this more like an initiative to have Africa tell its own story, rather than have foreign journalists coming to tell an African story?
Yes, I think this time should be over. I mean, it's the time of cooperation, and not the time of telling anybody what to think from another continent. So I think the good thing about this approach is that you have so many talents here in Africa. You have so many great journalists. I've met them now on my trip around Africa in the last days, and really convincing journalists, courageous journalists, and I think I was a reporter myself, and when I travel to distant places, it's always difficult to understand what is the story, what's the culture, what's the meaning behind the thing. So why don't we use more people from Africa who understand the culture better, who understand the way of life better, and this is the approach we're doing now. And
how long have you had your footprint in Africa?
Oh, I think for instance, our Kiswahili offer is older than 50 years now.
Wow.
So Deutsche Welle has been very active. We are very strong in the languages Hausa, Kiswahili, Amharic, and obviously English, French, Portuguese for Africa. So it has a long tradition, and has always been the voice of freedom, also for countries where there's not enough freedom and democracy. And we are convinced that our future lies as Germans in cooperating with other countries, and especially with Africa.
Okay. Now you have been to different parts of Africa, and you've probably sampled some of the journalists. How would you classify Kenyan journalists?
Very professional, very dedicated, and also sometimes with a good sense of humor. So I think humor is quite that helps. Yes, I mean, if you only do the serious journalist, it's necessary that the facts are right and everything's correct, but better presented sometimes with a bit of humor. Yeah.
Okay. Now in Africa we do have some challenges, you know, as journalists, in terms of terrain, in terms of the politics. What are your comments in some of the challenges that you see in Africa as compared maybe to other countries, to other continents?
Oh, well, you have the whole variety of governments. So you have countries where you have freedom of press, like here in Kenya. You have other countries where you don't have it, and where it's very difficult for journalists to work. And so we always have the problems for our correspondents to work properly. For instance, we had our DW correspondent in Nigeria who had been expelled by the last president from press conferences because he asked critical questions. Now with the new president, he got his accreditation back. So it's always a bit of struggle. So in some countries, but in generally, basically every country, every continent has its problems, and it has to cope with it. So even Germany, which is quite wealthy and has a lot of infrastructure. Also, their journalists have their problems with
their challenges.
So their challenges and to get information, because normally journalists want to get all the information, and the authorities doesn't want to give all the information. So it's in every country it's the same game, but with sometimes different rules, and sometimes you have countries where journalists risk their lives for getting information, and literally, not only because they're investigating in different difficult areas like for instance terrorist or crime areas, but also because the authorities doesn't want them to work.
Okay. Do you agree to the narrative that journalists shape the opinion of societies?
Not only them, but I think they have a high responsibility. I mean, media is not the only power that shapes the public opinion, but it has a high responsibility. So we have to be very careful what we're doing.
Because we have, especially from the political arena and many other arenas, we have many who possibly blame journalists for the turmoil that we might go through as a country. For example, let me just take an example of Kenya, where we've faced challenges with insecurity, and there's a narrative that journalists are responsible for the fact that the world out there views Kenya as insecure. What are your comments on placing so much on journalists to a point where they feel pressured, maybe not to report the story as it is, but to water it down a little bit for the sake of the country?
I think journalists have to report whatever they see, but they have to report as it is, of course, and but it's always also through their eyes. I mean, you don't have robots as journalists. You have people who have experiences, who have opinions, and they try to be objective, but it doesn't always work. But I think they have to report as it is, and don't blame them for the bad things happening in the country. I mean, it's if you have a terrorist attack, you can't just say, well, just another small terrorist attack, don't worry. You have to say, well, in this moment, this situation here is insecure and people are afraid. But the other question is how you approach in general then the country. Do you look at through the glasses that you say it's all insecure, it's unstable? No, it isn't. I mean, definitely not Kenya. I mean, it's sure you have also problems with terrorists, but in Germany you also have problems with terrorists. We were just lucky that we were just lucky that there hadn't been any big major terrorist attack in Germany. But you never know. So. But I wouldn't say Germany is insecure, nor would I say that Britain is insecure. I think we have to live with this fact, and at the end, to come back to your question, don't blame journalists for what is really happening. I mean, it's the easiest way always, but they have to cover the story and they have to be honest, but they have this responsibility. And if you don't live with this responsibility, then you're a bad journalist. Okay.
Now, I'm sure you have experience in different continents and different countries. Is it the same everywhere that bad news always sells?
Yes, bad news sells. This is a fact, but our approach is that the world doesn't exist only with bad news. I think one has to see that people get fed up if they only have bad news.
Right.
On the other hand, if you try to paint a beautiful picture of something, they wouldn't believe you either. So it's a question of balance.
It's a balance.
And for instance, I mean, Africa has been long time seen as a continent where nothing's working. It's always crisis, pollution, whatever, unemployment. Yes, that's a fact. It is. But there are so many great stories in Africa, so many interesting, positive things happening here. So we at Deutsche Welle, we think we have to bring this up more, because not only to be kind to Africans, but also to show that this is a fantastic continent with a lot of opportunities on education, on journalism, obviously also on business. So there's a lot happening here, and we're proud that we are going now with programs into the market. Africa on the Move is one that we show 90 stories of people in Africa who do tremendous, interesting things, new things, finding new approaches, economists, sports people, everything. So I think our responsibility also is, as Western journalists, to show these sides of Africa, not only the critical things.
Well, you've talked about balance, and one thing I must say is that we feel sometimes that balance lacks, especially when it is foreign journalists reporting about Africa. We find that mostly they'll report, the war, they'll report coups, they'll report generally very negative stuff. We rarely have positive material going out from Africa from foreign journalists. Why do you think that is the case?
I think it's the case because in the past Europe and the West didn't put enough interest in Africa. I mean, it's the easiest way in journalism, and I think it's not only happening to Africa. I mean, it's also happening into the Arab world. There are a lot of positive things going on to the Arab world, but for the moment it's a big mess over there. So one has to report this. So it also happens with South America. It's a kind of a, let's say, Western ignorance, which creates these kind of things. But when it comes, we're not only, also the Western media in itself, it's the same thing. It's if for instance, U.S. media reports about Germany, you will soon find a lot of prejudice, a lot of stories which we Germans would think, come on, this is not so big, but it works if you find a crisis. But it's an automatic thing about journalism, that they look for crises, and that's also their task to report what's happening. And if you have the Ebola crisis, you can't ignore it.
Right.
The question is, how do you judge it? Do you make a real big thing out of it, that at the end the Europeans think whole Africa has Ebola, which is stupid? Or do you go responsible to the story and say, well, it's a local thing and it's a bad thing, but it's not a crisis for whole Africa? And it's always, it comes back to how you judge the story, and there we have at the end the responsibility of journalism.
Okay. Now I know Deutsche Welle has been doing a talent search here in Kenya for journalists.
Yes.
Is there a reason why specifically Kenya, or is that something that you're doing generally in Africa?
No, we started with Kenya because Kenya is a great country. So I think this is why we did it, and we have a cooperation here with the Aga Khan University. And so tonight we're going to present the winners of this contest, and I'm happy that we can do it. And because that's what I said at the beginning, is that we have excellent journalists here and so dedicated people, and I would be glad if we had more of them in our network. And so we have African journalists who report also from Kenya, and so I'm happy that we're going this path. Let Africans talk about Africa for an international audience. Not only, we're not saying only Africans can talk about Africa, which is stupid, but they know more. They understand the culture.
They are in the terrain, and they understand the politics and the dynamics of Africa. And is this talent search for journalists from Kenya to work elsewhere? Is he based in Kenya? What's the plan?
Well, the plan is that we get more cooperation with Africa and also with Kenya. We now have here a correspondent, Edith Kimani. It's a known journalist here in Kenya. She will now work for Deutsche Welle. We're proud that she decided to come to us, and this is the first step. And we go on, and we already have for our radio stations and our online and mobile activities, we have a lot of African correspondents, freelancers and correspondents all over Africa. And we think that we have an advantage because we have so many local people working for us, maybe compared to other US stations who have their correspondents flying in. So I think this is, maybe it will take a bit longer to have the success, and it's always a money question. We can't hire now everybody we want to hire, but I think it's the right approach to go. And have more Africans in our new television news network, DW News. And I'm happy that Edith Kimani will contribute.
Absolutely fantastic. And also to know that KTN still churns out some good talent that is now working for you.
Have a look. But wash out.
Yes.
Your boss would be very bad in a bad mood if you tell us hire our people.
No, And is this something that you intend to continue with, or is it a one-off, the talent search?
Well, the talent search, I think it's more also not only a talent search, but it's also to honor good journalism. So we will do this surely also in other countries. But we'll see. Now we started this, and we have 10 people which we are honoring tonight, and I'm very happy that we do this. I think it's a good idea.
Okay, we'll come to the details of where this will actually be happening. But are there some challenges you found specifically looking for a journalist in Kenya?
I think you have the same challenges everywhere, basically.
They're not uniquely Kenyan.
So I have to say I'm not the expert in Kenyan journalism. So one thing about journalists is that if they're in the country for one day, they say we're an expert. But I wouldn't go this far. But I think you have the challenges that you have a lot of people who are really in need for information. They want to get knowledge. So it's always the question that you have this kind of journalism also, that people get educated from what you're doing. And I think what you just did the half hour before, so about health and medicine, was a good example of this.
Okay, and where is this going to be taking place? The talent search finals, or
well we are first in the Aga Khan University, and then afterwards we are in one big hotel in Kenya. I will not mention the name because it's we don't get money for it, so we don't mention the name.
Okay, and as we wind down and come to a close, looking at journalism as a whole, are there, journalists in Kenya and in Africa sometimes may feel a disadvantage, mainly because of cost of equipment, cost of just the whole cost of journalism. Is that a disadvantage that works against us compared to journalists maybe in the Western world, where equipment, for example, is more affordable?
Yes and no, because you have this would be right maybe 10 years ago, but the equipment in especially TV journalism or video journalism, the prices are going down. So you can do great TV journalism with one of your iPhones or smartphones. So I think this is something which has changed. So I think it's no longer an excuse. You can do great journalism here, and the costs obviously they are there, but compared to maybe 10 years ago, it's ridiculously low. You have to. It's not the question. Good journalism, at the end, it's the story. If the story is good and if it's good told, then you don't need very high sophisticated equipment.
Right.
So on the other hand, we as Deutsche Welle, we have an academy also, which is very active here in Kenya, and we are also investing in educating journalists. But put it this way, it's not longer that you don't know anything about journalism here in Kenya. There are excellent journalists.
Right.
So. But sometimes it's better in a cooperation to help and to learn from each other. We would like also to learn from yours, and we have, for instance, journalists who work for us who work with a very small budget, but they do great stories. So.
Okay, and maybe to journalists out there, potential journalists who feel disadvantaged or maybe are waiting for a Deutsche Welle to come and discover them, yet there is so much space opened up by technology, for instance, internet, and just like you've mentioned, smartphones. What would you say to them in terms of telling the story and not waiting for an organization to discover them?
Well, first of all, I think I have to do now some commercial in our own, for our own network. We have the Deutsche Welle App. The application, and with this application, it's a very new application, you can upload video content. So you can, if you download the Deutsche Welle app, you can upload the video content. It comes to us. So every journalist who has a good story and who has no chance of getting it into international media should bring this story to the Deutsche Welle app, and then we will see if it's a good story. Is it right? Is it good? So I think there are chances now with user-generated content and with this new devices like the DW app that we can get big talents very quickly. So I think don't lose the hope. Because
I guess one could also use free channels like YouTube channels to have your story told.
Yes. On one hand, yes, but YouTube is so full of videos. I mean, you have so many videos in there, so you maybe put in a great story, but it will never get
the airtime
it deserves. So why don't you just go directly to a network and show the story, and well, then you have maybe better chances to get it from like we think is a good thing, get it from local to global.
All right. Thank you very much, Mr. Peter Limburg, Director General for Deutsche Welle. And we're wishing you all the best. And thank you also for starting off with Kenya.
Yes, thank you very much. And it was a real honor to be here in your show. Thank you.
Thank you very much. All right, to our viewers, it's a wrap. And that's where we wrap it up this morning on Morning Express. Thank you so very much for joining us this morning. Do stay right here on KTN as we continue to bring you stories as they unfold. Otherwise, from the Morning Express crew, we'd like to take this opportunity to wish you all a fantastic and a wonderful day. God bless.